All right. We are live. Long time no see. Welcome back to Reasoned Answers.
It's as good as waging war against Allah and His Messenger.
All right. So get Mary back on here. She was just rebooting her computer to hopefully fix some audio issues. She told me to get started without her. So we are back. For those who see this.
I'm very confused. Let me make sure I didn't plug them in backwards because I've lost my mind, but I don't think I did. I think my computer just wants to really confuse us. But what I could do, we can have Mary with a different.
All right. Well, Mary will work on that audio. Welcome back, everyone. For those who see this later on a replay or tune in to this without understanding why I introduced it the way I did, we just had a debate with a individual calling himself an atheist, and then he said, I don't not believe in God. So then Mary said he was an agnostic. He referred to Mary by Islamic terms, but said that he doesn't speak Arabic. So that's why I put it in quotes, atheist in quotes. Anyway, we had some pretty poor audio on that. Hopefully get some better audio this time around. But right now we're just getting static from Mary, which is obviously much worse than getting poor quality vocals. So take that as you may. Had a couple super chats from the first stream. So from Scott A.
If you frequently say it, Allah would pay off your debts. So you can refer to it back again, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Scott A, for that support. I believe Mary did figure out her audio while that was playing.
Okay, I think we now have a working microphone. It's just one that I have to hold, and that's all right. Here, let me get my everything situated, and we will be good.
Mary's getting
why my computer decided to freak out about my headset, and I reset it now 3 times, and it's not happy. So
Scott A said, God bless you all. Thank you very much for that. And Danny also gave a super chat. It's supposed to play one of the new versions of clips, and it just loaded a black screen instead. I wonder if maybe I forgot to save that or move it to the directory. I don't know. Let's try again.
Well, I'm
early, and this is indeed a sign, yet most of them are not believers. Give alone to Allah, give alone to Allah. Ride the wings of Gabriel, give alone to Allah.
So I will figure that out later as to why the first one didn't work. But thank you very much, Danny Davis, who said Yeshua Akbar. Very true indeed. All right. So Mary, what are we going to do today now that we have dispatched our atheist friend who
I was destroyed.
Who had 2 degrees and yet.
Well, he was lying about his degrees, but he was admitting he was lying.
Mary.
Because
obviously, Mary, this is called sarcasm.
yeah. But I'm just saying for everybody else, he did admit that he was lying by saying that, and one and yapping, ha ha ha, so that he could get the old person and she thought I was serious. But the thing was, he said that God logic was stupid and that he would easily be able to defeat him. And then when God logic was like, okay, sure, join the stream, any stream. He's like, no, I will only debate on Discord. And then this very young, very new convert was like, some of the things he says sound convincing to me. And I showed him that some of them were just ridiculous. And he was like, but could you please just debate him? He says he will just defeat you. And he says he's not Arabic at all, but he uses to heal, right?
Yeah, and instead of saying that he's not Arab, he says he's not Arabic, which I guess means he doesn't speak Arabic, but then he uses Islamic terms, which makes it twice as strange.
Yeah, I thought he said Arabic and not even Arab, but
yeah, that's correct. He did. He said, I'm not Arabic. which,
Yeah.
correct, you're not a language, but what does that have to do with anything? And so I guess his handling on English is not that great, and yet he doesn't speak Arabic, and he's definitely not a Muslim, and so on and so forth. But just so you all know, Mary is a retard because he said that around 50 times in the 20 or 30 minutes that the so-called debate took place. That was the extent of his argument.
I will admit that I got him upset on purpose, but that's not neither here nor there. He's the one who got upset because I knew he was going to come in trying to like be as offensive and obnoxious as possible. I'm like, oh, you think that this is a great tactic? So I like provoked him a bit to see whether or not he would completely fall to pieces, which of course he did. All right.
Hold on, Mary. Breakfast Gun says audio is not synced. It should be.
Oh, you're a tiny bit behind your own, or your lips are
it's just like off
face.
like by half a second or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, then that's probably just lag issue as opposed to like an actual problem.
Yeah, and
so you just have to be slightly annoyed by that. Nothing I can do.
All right. The bad thing about this speaker is that my keyboard sounds like 50 times louder than even on my headset. So I really apologize if I start typing when I haven't muted myself. So
fair enough. So I was going to ask you this before we got started, but then we actually did have the debate, which we kind of didn't really anticipate actually happening. So the timestamps you gave me, there's 2 near the end. You want to start with those? Is that correct?
I want to start with 2 because I want to start with the famous clip of Jake that went viral. And I'll talk about very briefly. And then one other clip, which is very interesting. So
absolutely, we can do that. So let me share my screen.
And yes, he did have an accent as if his native language was Arabic. As daughter of the Most High is like, no, he's clearly Arab. I could hear it the way he was talking. Yeah, he really did.
Well, if he had just said that he was an Arab and spoke Arabic, then he would at least have an excuse for using Islamic terms, but he claimed he didn't, thus giving him no reason to use Islamic terms.
Right. Which is really funny. Like, it's whenever you make a lie, but you go too far.
Yep. All right. So
the first one should be 225.
Yeah, 225.
Actually, we're doing the very conclusion first. Then we're doing Jake embarrassing himself. I really like this one.
Yeah, give me 1 second here. So that I am ready when we get to the next one. So 225:18, you said, which is just like a couple seconds. Both these first ones are just a couple seconds long. That's good enough.
Like a Muslim, and that goes for anybody. So my position is that if you affirm the Shahada, you're a Muslim. And it doesn't matter what we disagree on. So we need to keep this in mind. So let me close. Jake says, I'm an Ismaili. So yeah, I'm an Ismaili. Here's what the Ismaili Imams say. They say that...
And that's all you wanted me to play of that?
I wanted to introduce that because it's always so amusing. Because in all of these Islamic debates, they'll cast this really, really, really wide tent and then spend all this time trying to show that the other person is actually is actually in reality is a polytheist or a disbeliever or something of that sort. So they talk out both sides of their mouth constantly. Now, they don't want to declare the other one a kuffar, because if they did so, what would that entail? It would mean that they would be declaring that they should die, et cetera, so they don't want to do that. But at the same time, they'll constantly attack the other one, going, you just kuffar everyone. You're just a takfiri. You're takfiri. You said that everything is kufr, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is extremely amusing because while they are simultaneously accusing the other person of being takfiri because they're saying that you shouldn't believe this, that this is wrong to believe in Islam because it would entail polytheism, right? So they're able to, they will speak that what the other person is doing is actually takfiring the other folks, but they will never say it to themselves. Like, I'm saying that you're a polytheist, but I don't takfir you. And that's why, and that, you notice, guys, that a lot of times I bring up my analogy. If I say that I worship Allah and he has 4 legs and a tail, am I worshiping Allah? And a lot of them have a very hard time saying that I'm not because of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very interesting, right? You said all you have to do is affirm the Shahada, which, even if you're affirming it, right, that's just an intellectual statement that there is one God and Muhammad's his messenger. That isn't actually submission, right, to anything. That's just affirming that's true. Like, I mean, a demon, assuming Islam was actually true, a demon could easily say that and disobey Allah, right? Anyone who affirmed that Allah exists and Muhammad's his messenger, but disobeyed him would still be a Muslim according to his definition.
Because they would be required to kill everyone else if they, so, you know, again, they have to talk out both sides of their mouth. It's very funny because they're going to spend quite a bit of effort, like accusing each other of claiming that, you know, these are the true Muslims and stuff, while they themselves are going, these are the true Muslims. But if it's to the point where you can't agree on what you are worshiping, what it is, are you worshiping the same God? If I tell you that I met your mom, her name's Cindy, and she is a really, really tall woman. She's like nearly 6 feet tall, and she looks like barely over 20 years old, and she posed in a magazine as a model last year. Would you say, oh, yes, you met my mother, but you're just wrong about her? No, you'd say you met someone else and you just thought she was my mother. But this is the extent to which they will affirm ridiculous things of their God to prevent the consequences.
Because ultimately Islam is about numbers. It's not really about theology, if we're being honest. So let's get...
It's about numbers until you're powerful enough that then you can start killing all the people that you takfired.
True. All right, so let's get the other closing statement, I think, from Jake here.
Please continue.
Yes.
Okay, are you able to point me in the direction of Allah's throne? He's on mute, so.
Sorry about that. Yes, we can point to it. Alhamdulillah, just as Abdul Qadir al-Jalani stated earlier when he quoted the hadith, which you also mentioned, where the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam approved the belief of the girl when he asked her, where is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And she pointed to the heavens.
Okay, can you point where is Allah right now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, can you do it with your finger?
Yeah, we point up.
Okay, so Allah is up. Okay, Allah.
You asked about the throne. Yes, it is.
Okay, is the throne below Allah?
No, when did I say that? The throne is not.
I'm asking you.
No, the throne is not. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above the throne. This is what I said.
Is the throne below Allah?
Yes.
The throne is below Allah.
I just said that, yeah.
Okay. Is the lowest heaven below the throne?
Is the lowest heaven below the throne? Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Would you affirm that Allah, per the hadith, descends every night to the lowest heaven?
Yes, I affirm nuzul because it's mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam.
Okay, so then do you affirm that Allah descends from above the throne to below the throne?
He never leaves the throne. But I believe that he descends. Yes, it's a real descent of nuzul, which is mentioned in the text.
Okay, what's the meaning of a descent here? Because descent means to go from above to below. So what does nuzul mean?
Yes, we understand it in the plain meaning, which is mentioned in the hadith. If I had it in front of me, I can read it. but it's very clear. I think everybody knows what descent means.
So you affirm that Allah descends from above the throne to the lowest heaven below the throne.
Without entering his creation, yes.
Okay, but he does move then from above the throne to below the throne.
Did I mention anything about movement?
Well,
I
you
don't
said
think I
everybody
mentioned
knows.
anything about movement.
Okay, what is the meaning of descend that everybody knows?
I just explained it to you.
So
No, you can explain it again. I'm dumb. Explain
unfortunately, that's time. Even though this got really interesting.
Yeah, let him answer the question.
You can have 20 seconds, Jake, if you'd like.
Explain it again. What's the meaning of nuzul that everybody knows?
Yeah, so I explained it, and Ibn Taymiyyah, which you said that I couldn't appeal to, which I don't know why. All I told you was I don't agree with him on every single position, and that's certainly fine. But when it comes to the usul, I agree with him. And the fact of the matter is, he explains this. He talks even about the spirit coming down and the angels and this type of so-called movement, which we cannot really understand. And he compares that to the nuzul or descent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says the difference in that is exponentially greater. Therefore, we cannot understand the kayfiyah. We don't have enough knowledge on it. We stick to the text and what it says, and we don't dwell on the kayfiyah.
Okay, thank you. Just like we can't understand the kayfiyah of Trinity.
And they're each trying to argue that the other has an inexplicable, inaccessible God. And the funny thing is that they're both 100% right. And they both pretend that the other one is wrong. So no, this was not modern day debates. This was on an Islamic channel because they're arguing two different schools of Aqidah, of like creedal schools. Well, the Sunni ones are called Aqidah. I'm not sure if the Shia are called the same, but it's between an Ismaili, who is a Neoplatonist, and an Athari, who is God is a big, giant creature in the sky. And we just don't say why it is that we believe in him.
And there is a link to the debate in the video description if you want to check out the whole thing later, although we will go through a substantial portion. Now, Mary gave me a ridiculous number of timestamps. We'll divide this into two, I'm sure.
Yes, we absolutely
still want to, like, just playing the timestamps would take a couple hours, let alone
it's less than 2 hours. I skipped it up. It's less than 2 hours, but yeah.
Okay, fine. It would take an hour and a half just to play them. And we know Mary will probably talk much longer than the amount of time of the segment. So anyway, we'll divide this up. But if you want to check out the full debate, you're welcome to do so. I linked to it in the description. But that last clip there should give you a pretty good idea of how ridiculous this is going to be. Jake's position is that I affirm everything the text says, but I have no idea what any of it means. That's basically his position.
And the thing is that he's saying that we understand descent in the plain meaning, but we deny movement.
Yeah, we understand the plain meaning. I think everyone knows what that means. What does it mean? We have no idea.
Yep. And that is the Athari position. And he did a very good job there of drawing out how ridiculous it is. Jake is not as skilled a debater. It's so funny. Khalil was like, oh, I'm not a debater, little old me. I'm an academic. Oh my goodness, I find myself here. Look at all my academic credentials. You just need to believe that I would never just go out and debate, but I think that this is so important, little old me. So that's like Khalil the entire time. And he is actually a much better rhetorician than Jake is, because Jake is used to being on a stage where he talks over, yells over, changes the subject, and makes things incoherent as much as possible. And Khalil will appear to give an actual answer, but then he misrepresents what he's saying, or he twists things. So that is the difference between the two. So it's going to be pretty hilarious. But go ahead.
I was going to say, plus Jake has literally, like, if you watch one Jake video, you'll have watched every single video, because he literally only ever talks about one thing, and that's that he thinks the Trinity is incoherent. That's literally the only point he can ever make. And, well, when he gets out any other subject, he's going to be humiliated.
Well, he can't get out. He can't do well on that subject either, because I have actually gone up. I have spoken about 3 sentences that absolutely demolished his position, kicked gone, blocked, would not engage with me. If I even it was pretty funny.
Well, but my point was that he at least has a script to follow, right? He at least has words to say.
Oh,
but when you get on any other
here.
subject,
and actually a fair number of them are valid points. He just is not the smooth talker, and he's so overly aggressive rather than just getting in little jabs here and there that he seems like a worse actor.
Mm-hmm.
And it performs well to the "oh, me strong" crowd, but that's not as many people as he thinks it is. So, all right, go ahead.
Yep. All right. So let's start here with the first opening statement, I believe.
The subject of today's debate is Tawheed and the oneness of Allah. I will be defending the Athari position, and Mr. Andani will be defending Islamic philosophy, and more specifically, the Ismaili Neoplatonic model. However, as you soon will see, Khalil's position is not only false, but there's nothing Islamic about it. Now, let me explain the structure of my opening statement. I will start by outlining what the Athari Creed is and the reasons for holding to it. And next, I will provide and explain what Khalil's position is and provide reasons for rejecting it. So, what is Athari Creed? Well, we affirm what the Quran and Sunnah affirm for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we do not attempt to go further. We accept what has come to us in the Quran and the authentic Sunnah without rejecting the text, without tajseem or making Allah like his creation. Nor do we create esoteric interpretations of the text that no sensible person could derive from the text alone. We do not seek to use alien philosophies and metaphysical notions that are not derived from the text in order to derive our interpretations of the text itself. This is primarily because we are certain in our belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists and that he has sent the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam with the Quran and the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet, which is obligatory to affirm and to follow. We have no doubt about the truthfulness of the guidance that has reached us, and so we accept it as it comes. We seek to have our beliefs and creedal affirmations in line with what the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam has taught.
So I just realized that was the end of the clip that Mary wanted me to play, but I just realized something very important. I forgot to make this clip public, or this stream public. It's listed as unlisted, so only those people who came over from the stream were able to see it, but I just now made it public. So if you just get a notification and you join in the stream, my apologies. I accidentally started the stream as unlisted. So Mary, what are we doing here for those who just joined in late?
Okay, so what we are doing is we are going through. Khalil has recently debated Sam Shamoun. Jake has recently debated. Wait, what was that other debate? But anyway, there have been some recent debates. I think Jake recently debated on. Did he debate on whether or not Justin Martyr believed in the Trinity? And in that debate, by the way, his main argument was trying to be that Justin Martyr's articulation, I think it was Justin Martyr or Tertullian or somebody, anyway, that their articulation of the Trinity was not precisely identical with the articulation in the councils that came later. And so they did not believe in Trinity because there are tiny, 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 tiny differences in articulation, right? That you have to have the full articulation because otherwise no one ever taught that we have one God, that Jesus is God, the Holy Spirit is God, the Father is God, and the Son is eternally God, and Jesus in incarnation is the incarnational God. That they did not teach that, and there is one God. That was not was not taught if it is not articulated in the exact way that he wants it articulated with basically the same words. He wants to posit that this kind of means that there is doctrinal development to the point that people are believing completely different things. So he begins by claiming, because this is where he has the chance to show that his belief was explicitly taught by the was the Salafi belief, like the actual Salafi as a group, right? That the people who were the immediate people around, the immediate successors of the prophet, the immediate people around him, those first 3 generations, that they believed the Athari creed, because it would be wildly inconsistent to claim that the Athari creed was articulated later on, use new words, use new definitions, introduce things to systematize even the same belief. But he will fail to show that this belief was the belief of the followers of Muhammad. Instead, he will just claim that it's the only belief that you would naturally get from the sources. But he also doesn't show this. He just goes, this is what people believed. We affirm this, and our interpretive lens is the correct one, because that's one they always use. Yeah, evidence. Now, the earliest tafsir that exists is Muqatil's tafsir, right? And Muqatil's tafsir was thrown out. It is not used. Muqatil was accused of interpreting the divine attributes in a literal and sometimes anthropomorphic sense. He affirmed the divine countenance as a literal face, the divine eye as a literal eye, etc., etc. He also, above the him being above the throne as being like all of these things. All of these things got people to accuse him of being an anthropomorphist. Now, later people sometimes defended him and said, no, he wasn't. But the understanding of the people of his time that he was an anthropomorphist. Another example, here I'm just reading, I think this is from a Wikipedia. Another example of alleged anthropomorphic view of Muqatil was attributed to a statement that Allah possessed bodily parts such as flesh, blood, hair, bones, and such. So, some contemporary Muslim scholars to him were convinced of Muqatil's extreme anthropomorphism that they even came up with Muqatiliyya to designate a sect which allegedly followed Muqatil in such views.
But isn't that just what what the texts say, though, Mary?
And that is what the texts actually say. So Muqatil is the one who is taking the text at face value. The early 2 views were actually Mu'tazilite, which abstracted everything and basically denied the basic teachings of Muhammad to subject it to a more theological framework, and the anthropomorphists. It's just that later they said, we're not anthropomorphists because Allah never says he has a jism, a body. Therefore, it's not anthropomorphic. It's fine. It's fine. So, yeah, that is essentially the state of the Athari, that as long as we do not attribute a literal body to Allah, because Allah never says, my body, that word is never attributed to him.
I mean, that's so stupid, though, right? Like they affirm that Allah has hands, for example, but they also say doesn't have body parts. So he has a hand, but it's not a body part.
Right, and
he descends, but he doesn't move, or anything else, right? They affirm all the words, but then completely contradict what the words mean.
And so I want to share with you someone who talks about the terminology that who uses the Athari as well as everybody else uses terminology that comes directly from Christian articulations and the Christian themselves. We swiped Aristotelian terminology because it was the technical terminology of the age, and redefined the words to fit what we needed it to mean. But he's saying that they don't use, that this is just the plain meaning. This is the actual teachings. But these words, Muhammad did not use them in this way. Muhammad's immediate followers did not use them in this way. They were not used until they came in contact with other people, with other beliefs that they borrowed from. So I'm going to...
terminology that was used by the Mutakallimun.
And very quickly, Mutakallimun Kalimun, sorry, means those who did kalam. And even though the Athari deny kalam specifically as a discipline of philosophy, they deny this as a way to derive at meaning of Allah. They use the same words, they use the same terminology, and they take it from there.
The Arabic term that best reflects the shades of meaning, of nature, essence, substance, the Arabic category of tabi'a or jawhar shay, is sifa, or plural sifat. Sifa has the overtone of description or describing. Another term that was used in close association with sifa is ma'ana, which means meaning, sense, signification, denotation, connotation, concept, notion, and in a more broader context, nature. At the time of the Mutakallimun, this term was interchangeable with sifa as well as shay, which literally meant thing, which it still means today. Both ma'ana and shay were used to translate the Greek term pragma, i.e. thing, especially with regards to Aristotle. For example, see Ishaq ibn Hunayn. In order to emphasize the realities of the persons of the Holy Trinity, the Greek fathers used the Greek term pragma as synonymous with hypostasis and prosopon. It was used at the Council of Antioch, as well as by Saint Athanasius, by Saint Basil, by Saint Cyril of Alexandria, and even Theodore Abukura in the 8th and 9th centuries. When writing of the Holy Trinity, Yahya ibn Adi, a Christian, Sadia, a Jew, and Ibn Hazm, a Muslim, all use the terms shay and ma'ana. Furthermore, Yahya ibn Adi also writes that the aqanim, or persons, of the Holy Trinity are khawas and sifat, where khawas is equivalent to the Greek idiotites of St. John of Damascus's hypostatike idiotites, or hypostatic properties, and where sifat is equivalent to the Greek of St. John of Damascus's to characteristikon tis idias hypostaseos, or that which is characteristic of the proper hypostasis. Ash'ari refers to attributes using the term ma'ana in his Luma, while using the term shay in his Majalis. He even writes in his Baqalat that the Mutakallim Abdallah ibn Kulab uses the terms shay, ma'ana, and sifa interchangeably. Therefore, we have a direct connection linking the Orthodox Christian Greek pragma, prosopon, and hypostasis as real entities of the Godhead to the Muslim Arabic sifa, ma'ana, and shay as real entities of the attributes of Allah. With regards to person or persona, there are two Arabic terms, that and uknum. The word that has the overtones of self, being, essence, nature, and is readily used in that sense by the Mutakallimun. That and sifa do overlap in meaning, but they are not wholly synonymous with each other. On the other hand, the term uknum is an Arabicized term that derives from Syriac. Usage of uknum is always, and I stress always, with respect to the original Syriac meaning, namely the Christian notion of hypostasis. So when Yahya ibn Adi uses the Arabic terms shay and ma'ana, as mentioned previously, in place of uknum, he does so with the full meaning of the term uknum.
So why did you make us watch that, Mary?
So
I don't know what his point was.
So he is explaining that all of these terminologies are secondhand. Not only the terms, but a great deal of their meaning comes from Christianity. So if you talk about the sifa, there is a connection to Christian thought there. It's a derivative of Christian thought. So if you're saying that Muhammad taught Tawheed al-Sifat, no, you can't teach that. You can't say that because he did not. He did not have that terminology. That terminology is from where? It's from Christianity.
I mean, Muhammad could have stolen it from Christianity. Why does it have to be a later Muslim that stole it?
Because it because again, nothing is supposed to be stolen from Christianity to begin
Well,
with. And
forget that,
secondarily,
Mary.
there's
We know
no
it is.
reference. There's no reference in any of the earliest writings to any of these terms. The only one that shows up anywhere is there is one attributed hadith where Muhammad supposedly invokes Tawheed. But Tawheed does not mean that. What modern Muslims claim it does in the Arabic language, or much less in what they were taking it from, because they meant to express what they were taking it from. They meant to express that thing.
All right, so let's get Jake's position back here on screen. I'm still not clear of what this has to do with Jake's position, though.
Jake's position
So he
is
affirmed.
that,
Hold on, Mary. So
Okay.
he affirms the text, which just means he affirms the words. But then he says that he affirms the attributes of Allah with their meanings, but I guess he doesn't know what their meanings are.
no, well, he's saying he's affirming the attributes of Allah with their plain meanings.
Well,
But
yeah, he says that.
attributes there, that word is sifat. So he is saying that he believes what the Salafi believed by
Right. So I was going
affirming
to get
the
to that
sifat.
part. Right. We got
So-
that in the last one here. I was going to
Right.
get to that part, but
Mhm.
I'm just going through his position, right? So he affirms the attributes of Allah, whatever that means. And he says, we don't believe Allah has body parts, which is very strange because the plain meaning of the text says he does. And then he says, we don't liken Allah to his creation, but that doesn't actually get you anything, right? So you are supposed to affirm that as a Muslim. The text does say that. But that
Yeah.
doesn't actually mean he doesn't have body parts. It just means the
No.
body parts he has are unlike human body parts or unlike any animal body parts. So that doesn't actually get he doesn't have body parts. And then finally, we affirm the creed of the early righteous generations, which, as you're pointing out, is complete nonsense because there's no evidence anyone believed this. Right? I mean, they affirmed the words, right? You can get that part, that they affirmed the words, but they actually followed the plain meaning. At least that would be the logical assumption. Either Muhammad was going around saying meaningless sentences and everybody understood they were meaningless and still believed them, which seems to be Jake's position, or they understood the sentences in the plain and ordinary way, that when, as someone pointed out a minute ago, they would recognize Allah's shin, they were thinking of a body part that looks something at least like a shin that they would be familiar with, or it's a meaningless description.
Right. And well, and here's the thing. He's saying that he is affirming the creed, and creed means not just faith, but an articulation. It's a creedal statement, right? Of the early righteous generation. So the aqidah of the Salafi, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying this, as he's saying, we affirm the sifat of Allah. My question is, did the early generation articulate that they affirmed the sifat of Allah with the meaning that Jake has? Will he ever provide evidence for that? The answer
of course not.
will be no. He just states it because
Well,
there's
considering
zero
that,
evidence.
I don't think he can actually tell us what the meaning is. It would be impossible for anyone to affirm
Yes.
what the meaning is.
He just says it's the plain meaning, but he can't tell us what that meaning is, which is really funny.
Yeah, if it's plain, how come he can't describe it, right?
Yep.
Well, which brings up this other one here from Old Catholic. I thought the Quran is clear. Now, it clearly affirms that Allah has hands, but we don't know what those are. We have literally no idea what Allah's hands are, but we affirm that he has hands because that's what the plain meaning of the text says.
All right. So
A little incoherent, I must say. Let's continue on.
Doubt about the truthfulness of the guidance that has reached us, and so we accept it as it comes. We seek to have our beliefs and creedal affirmations in line with what the Prophet ﷺ has taught and what he has brought and taught to his companions, and what the righteous from the earliest generations affirmed and taught as well. This is quite simple, straightforward, and easy to understand. However, in order to understand the creed, you must be familiar with the text of the Quran and the Sunnah. So, let's take a look at some examples. Starting with, to understand Tawheed, let's start with Surah Ikhlas. In the Quran, chapter 112, verses 1 to 4, Qul huwallahu ahad. Say, He, Allah, is one. Allahu samad. Allah is the one who depends on nothing, but everything depends on Him. لم يلد ولم يولد. He begets not, nor is he begotten. ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. And there is none equivalent to him. So Allah is one, independent, does not beget.
I just want to pause for a second here before we get to the end of the clip. Notice that he added words to clarify what the perfectly clear Quran meant. Did anyone else catch that? Like he says he's
not
reading
only
the verse.
that, he's using a mistranslation.
Well, that I didn't know, but he literally said he's reading this verse and then added a whole nother clause to the sentence and just acted like nothing had happened.
Yes. So what it actually says is say he Allah is one of, or a one among many. It's multiple. And what's so important about this is that anytime you'll find this word ahad many times in the Quran, but every single time that you find it, except for here, it's whenever you're saying there is none. So it says not ahad, right? Rather than, and then any positive case, it says any one of whatever, a one of whatever, because it fundamentally means one of a group, or in the negative, none of a group. So the grammar of this demands that Allah is an exemplar of a group. Now, why would the Quran have something that is this absolutely ludicrous for Islamic belief? Because the actual word for one in Islam, which is wahid, does not sound like ehad, which is the Hebrew for one, in the same way that ahad does. So ehad and ahad sound really similar, but wahid sounds quite different. Even though wahid and ahad actually have the same meanings, he instead used a word in the same family, but then that renders the grammar nonsensical. And so again, remember, this is supposed to be a clear book, but now we have to have all of these esoteric and metaphysical, and what does this ahad mean in this particular context? Because grammatically it's incoherent. Why? Because he's imitating the Shema of the Jews in sound, butchering the Arabic grammar. Then the next line, Allah is who? Al-Samad, the solid one. It does not say he on whom all depend. It says the solid one. He's solid. He's not without any hollowness. He's completely solid. Now, what would that imply of Allah? A material existence in the way that we understand materiality. He has solidity. With solidity comes extent. He occupies space. Mm-hmm. And yes, indeed, he was in a place before creation. Why? In an actual place. And he is time and all the rest of this. Because why? Because that was Muhammad's understanding. Because he didn't understand these things. And then he begets not, nor is he begotten. Just defies Christianity. But I want to point out.
Can I ask you a question first, Mary? So with English, beget can sometimes be used for things other than reproduction. Does the Arabic word limited to biological reproduction? Because if not, then Allah is actually claiming he doesn't create.
I do not.
You're not sure.
Do not think it is absolutely limited to biological reproduction. That I don't think it's as broad, but it's not used as commonly in that sense. But there are metaphorical senses of being a person's son is certainly used frequently, mm-hmm. Like in the same way that you would have in the Bible, sons of perdition and things like that, right? You mm-hmm. would be able to say the exact same thing in Arabic, and so there are metaphorical uses of terms. But if begetting is distinct from creation, this would deny a substantial At minimum, this denies a substantial relationship between Allah and his creation. Now, this is going to be a problem for the Ismailis because there is not this substantial distinction between Allah and creation because they are panentheists. They might not always like that term. Sufis sometimes embrace it, but creation is not a completely otherness thing than Allah in this Sufi Ismaili paradigm. Neoplatonism, because he calls it Neoplatonism, involves the emanation, generation, beginning, and creating through coming from the substance, the original substance. That is the fundamental core of Neoplatonism, is that all the substances have a foundation in some way with the divine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that it's pretty clear why this sentence is here, because it doesn't add anything. It doesn't tell you anything. It's here literally just to contradict the Christian creed that whether Muhammad was directly familiar with or not, certainly he would have heard Christians who expressed the idea of Jesus being the only begotten from the Father. So that's why he says, oh, Allah doesn't beget, nor is he begotten. But if we just take that sentence out, then there's actually nothing about that sentence that adds any meaning to the paragraph.
Correct.
And then finally, none is like him, which doesn't mean a whole lot. I mean, if you want to be technical, no one is like me, right? No one is like Mary. No one is like anything. Everything is unique to some degree. And thus why Muslims will have to affirm that Allah is completely and totally unlike anything in creation, to the point where you can't use words to describe him. They become utterly meaningless.
Right. And again, that's...
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right, let's continue.
But this is the the foundation of Athari creed, is understanding there's nothing like him or like unto him, some translations have, as having this deep esoteric meaning that no one would actually get from the text just by reading it.
Mm-hmm. And just to be clear for Joe Bida here, we are currently explaining the position of Jake. We are not currently alleging a contradiction. I know it's very difficult for you to understand that people would explain what they're talking about before making assertions, but that's in fact what we're doing here.
Nor is he begotten, and there is none equivalent to him. But that's not all.
If you just
Allah
pause
is the...
Sorry, 1 second. And he actually gives a better translation than he wrote there. None is equivalent to him. So that's actually what it means, that none is equal to him. None is his equal.
Well, that's actually, yeah, okay.
Which is actually different, but they tried to make that like, well, you can't use metaphor because that's equating things to God. But is it really? Is it saying that they are identical? No, it's not.
No,
all right. So.
They're definitely not.
The one without any partners, children, or anything else that you can think of, as he has not in need of anyone or anything. Again, in the Quran, chapter 59, verses 22 to 24, he is Allah, other than whom there is no deity, knower of the unseen and the witness. He is the entirely merciful, the especially merciful. He is Allah, other than whom there is no deity, the sovereign, the pure, the perfection, the bestower of faith, the overseer, the exalted in might, the compeller, the superior. Exalted is Allah above whatever they associate with him. He is Allah, the creator, the inventor, the fashioner. To him belong the best names. Whatever is in the heavens and earth is exalting him, and he is the exalted in might, the wise. Notice that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belong the best names, the creator and the one who...
All right, so that's where Mary wanted me to pause this here.
You can just jump to the next section okay. Because it was actually just finishing up all of the kind of thing. But again, he's proposing a real attribute to the name. Would anyone here naturally think that a name is a self-existent thing inside of Allah's being from this?
Yeah, so, very strange here. That, well, maybe not very strange, but I just found it funny. He's entirely merciful. And also, especially.
Yeah, it doesn't say that, by the way. That's the Al-Rahman or Rahman Al-Rahim is behind that. So it's a repetition of the same word, and one in a Sabaic language, old South Arabian language, and then the other one in actual proper Arabic. But they have the identical meaning. But they can't say that they have the identical meaning, so you have to make up things so that it's not.
Well, yeah, that would make it even worse.
Yeah.
I was making fun of it because it was not incoherent, but repetitive as is.
Yeah.
But if it was literally the same word, then that's all the more repetitive, right?
Yeah, it's just in two different languages, basically. And one of them was applied to the Father by Christians and to God by Jews before Muhammad adopted it. And this section also says that he is not the one who is the bestower of faith, but in fact, Muhammad or Allah is the believer. So this is where Allah becomes a believer in himself. It also does not say he has the best names. It says it really means the beautiful names. And sometimes beautiful can be used in the sense of best or very good. So the beautiful names, the good names. It doesn't mean there's no superlative there. He just has beautiful names. So my question is also, aside from the fact, where does this teach that all these names are ontological realities, but also where does it teach that these are the only beautiful or good names that can be applied to Allah are the ones that are already applied by Muhammad, either in the Quran or in the Sunnah? Where does it say that these names, that you can't have another name that's not in that list? Like,
so hold on, Mary. I'm going to interrupt you because Joe Bitta is blatantly lying about us. He claims that we never talk about what we believe in. Since you are blatantly lying about us, and you are blatantly lying about us because there's another Muslim in the chat and you're trying to deceive them, guess what? You just earned a timeout, Mr. Lying, Deceiving Joe Bitta. Now to Mike, pay attention and learn.
And I am here as an outsider critiquing a debate between two Muslims about their own statements about their particular creeds.
Right.
And I am also going to do some comparisons to Christian theology. So that actually will come in later on.
Oh, okay. I was going to make a false statement. I was going to say it doesn't matter if you believe in the space monster. When you're critiquing an Islamic position, what you believe doesn't matter. But if you're going to compare it to Christianity, then it is good to know that you affirm the truth of what you're comparing it to. Yeah, so that is good to know. But we don't hide what we believe, right? No. Joe Bitta claimed that he didn't know whether we were Trinitarian Christians or not. He is just flat out lying. He has come to many of these streams. He knows exactly what our position is. Yep. And he's just pretending that we hide our position.
Correct. All right. Let's keep.
Who knows all things. We believe Allah when he states in the Quran that he created Adam alayhi salam with his own hands and that he is above the throne. However, this does not mean that we believe Allah has physical limbs, nor do we say that he is encompassed by space. We affirm these texts on their apparent meanings and that it is obligatory to believe in them, not seeking to reject them without making ta'wil or seeking false interpretations, while at the same time not likening Allah to his creation.
So that was quite literally a contradiction, right? Because he says, we affirm the texts by their apparent meaning, but we also don't believe their apparent meaning. And we don't see any problem with this.
Yep. And that means allegorical or metaphorical interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
So not,
he specifically said, right. He specifically ruled out the possibility.
Right. So, sorry. I mean, ta'wil, because they'll be throwing in Arabic words. So that means that you do it without, you should do this without an allegorical or non-literal interpretation. So whenever it says hands, it means literally hands. Now, I do want to point out that these hands must mean something more than just his power, because what does Allah not create by his power? So Mike, no, Joe Bitta actually knows exactly what we believe. He's just lying to you. So this is, you can't say that it just means his power, because Allah is arguing that prostration is necessary because Adam was made with his hands. Now, if he is making everything with his hands, that would mean that prostration to anything would be appropriate and correct and excellent, right? And yet, that's not the argument he's making here. This Adam is made with my hands, therefore prostrate. So something about making with the hands is different from the way other things are made. Now, he says that Allah does not possess physical body parts because it doesn't say the word body. That's what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because it does not say the word body.
Right. So his position, right? His position is that Allah definitely has hands. This definitely is not a metaphor, but also it's definitely not a physical hand.
And here, let me.
What other possibility is there other than it being a physical hand or a metaphor?
None, but he won't. He won't affirm either one. So, sharing really quickly here, and proof, he says that he is not encompassed by space. But what does the Sunnah say? That he has to understand with the plain meaning. I said, O Messenger of Allah, where was our Lord before he created his creation? So where is a spatial word. Where is he in space? He said he was above the clouds. Can you share my screen? Below which was air.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't realize
Above
that.
which was air and water. Then he created his throne above the water. So for all of those who think that I'm just making stuff up, Sunan Ibn Majah 182, and there are a number of other hadith that have the same story. This is not the only one that has this exchange. So he will affirm not located in space. Allah says, or Muhammad says, I was in a place. I was located. But he believes it with the plain meaning. All right.
Yeah. Plus, right, he's affirming something. Allah does not have physical body parts. Even if he can truthfully argue that the Quran never uses the words physical body parts, it certainly doesn't say Allah does not have them. So is that not him adding something to the text? Like, he should at least leave open the possibility.
Oh, it's better. The Athari are not allowed to affirm a body, but they're also not allowed to
Disaffirm?
deny a body.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Yep. This is supposed to be what Muhammad taught, by the way. And they do use the Muhammad is a young, beautiful man hadith, but that's not a body somehow. He's a youth in that hadith, but they don't affirm him as a youth, even though it's used to describe him, which is really interesting. And they use that hadith. They affirm that hadith. They repeat that hadith. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
Well, I mean, it's no different. That's the pattern we're going to see over and over again. They affirm the words, but they don't know what the words mean.
Well, they don't even affirm the word youth for him. They don't affirm the word beardless for him, even though it's in that hadith that they use. They only affirm some words used of him. So.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get some more here.
At the same time, we are not anti-reason. We believe that reason is
Seriously? That's his next statement after saying that Allah's hands are not physical, but they're also not metaphor. He says, but we affirm reason. We are not anti-reason. We deny both possibilities, and we believe in the excluded middle, but we are not irrational. Oh my goodness.
gift from Allah to mankind, and that using it properly is praiseworthy. We do not believe that the text of the Quran and the Sunnah can or do contradict reason. However, we are highly skeptical of metaphysical principles that are alien to the Quran and Sunnah, or even contradict them, and at times are used to construct theologies that are not in agreement with the text. On the other hand, reason can be employed as an apologetic tool in defense of the Quran and Sunnah. This includes rational argumentation for the existence of God that is derived from the text itself. We can speak more about these issues in detail later if need be.
Oh, I think it'll need to be.
Yeah. So the Athari Creed explicitly denies kalam as being a methodology that is valid for arriving at truth. And kalam is the general name for reasoning about the sifat and the nature of God, the dhat, and all the rest of that. That you cannot reason about these things in philosophical ways, but you can argue with people using reason. Now, this is the position of Ibn Taymiyyah, and you'll find your buddy, our buddy Khalil here, hammering on the fact that they deny kalam to say that they deny all reason and argumentation. But it's also funny because Jake will use the denials of the Ismaili of particular specific methodologies to say that the Ismaili deny all reason too. The Ismaili are in the Neoplatonist philosophical vein. So they are philosophical, but their philosophy is not identical with kalam and has certain issues with certain parts of it. But they will each accuse the other of being against all argumentation, which, like, no one's against all argumentation no matter what they say, because even saying that you cannot use reason
right, I was
is
saying
an
I'm
argument,
against argumentation is an argument, right?
Right, that's an argument. But they will use this against each other consistently in this and spend a lot of time going, you will not acknowledge reason and you will not acknowledge reason on all of this stuff. It's hilarious.
Oh, man.
I believe some Muslims may also be confused about this.
Or all, whichever.
I will now turn to my opponent's position and present three main arguments against it. My first argument is meant to establish an internal inconsistency, both in Khalil.
Sorry, why is he attacking his opponent's position in his opening statement? Shouldn't that be for rebuttal? Just saying.
Well, they're actually both going to spend most of their time attacking the other one's position, but he has not actually established. He has stipulated that this is the belief. This is a literal.
Oh, yeah, he just stated, right? He just said words, but he didn't argue for anything.
Right, he stipulated that this is the belief of the first three generations who were Muhammad's followers. He stipulated these things, but you can't mistake stipulations for argumentation. What is his evidence for it? His evidence for it is that he believes that the only way in which you would rationally read those texts would be through an Athari lens. I don't think any person who is not already dedicated to an Athari point of view would have that belief. Anyone. I don't care whether or not you're a Zoroastrian or a Jew or a Christian or an atheist or an agnostic or another Muslim. No one who is not already dedicated to the Athari creed would have that idea from it. And that's what he needed to argue for. This is awesome. So
yeah. So hold on, Mary. So Joe Bitta gave some good advice. Use your brain. Unfortunately, he didn't follow it. Mary seems to be very eager to explain, so I won't.
I love this one. All right, so I will share my screen in just a second. So a clock has a hand. Does that make a clock anthropomorphic? Use your brain. Now, why do we say that a clock has a hand? We say it because it is metaphorical, because it points. It has a function of pointing, therefore is metaphorical. If you are explaining Allah's handedness as similar to the use of the term hand for a clock, you are making a direct metaphor between Allah's being and handedness, which is, guess what? Tamthil, which is comparison. So you're making comparison. You're also doing ta'wil, which is the metaphor allegorical interpretation. And you're also doing tashbih, which is assigning resemblance to something in creation. So you are doing of the things, and you're also distorting his hand into something other than a hand by saying that it's like a hand of a clock. So the only thing that you are not doing, and you are giving it a further description. So you are doing all the things that Salafis cannot do or not allowed to do by making that statement. You can't say that and still be an Athari, right? You cannot say this. And
Yeah,
yet
if
that's
someone
what they
wants,
always jump to, is something that's forbidden. Why?
right,
Because their position makes no sense.
right. If someone wants to claim it's a metaphor, they can just say it's a metaphor. They don't have to bring a clock into it. But according to Jake, who is correctly stating the position of his sect, you cannot make a metaphor. And thus, Joe here is trying to make a metaphor to prove that it is not a metaphor. I don't know.
Yeah. So here is a statement of a sheikh that with an articulation that the Atharis are supposed to agree with. Allah descends a descending worthy of his lordship without how. So you say, without saying how and what this signifies at all. Without that his descending is similar to the descending of creation. So you're saying his descending is not, so he does descend, but it's something that's completely unlike creation. Without assigning a resemblance to something in creation, again, or negating it. Oh, excuse me, he didn't do one thing. He did not negate it, but he kind of did, because he negated a human hand. He did do a negation there. And without negating it. So you do not deny that he truly descends, but you say that it's totally unlike a descent in creation, and so you cannot say that it's going down. But you keep its plain meaning, which is a descent. It's not going down, because descent in creation is going down. Exonerated is he above what those who deny that he has a body say considering his attributes, and what those who say that he has a body say with reference to it. High and great is he. So this is the belief that Jake is trying to defend in a debate, claiming that this is the plain meaning of the Quran and was taught by the true Salafi. So, and my question is, can you even translate hand to hand if you can assign no semantic significance to it? So you affirm the plain meaning, but then deny semantic significance in the same breath. So, all right, we are ready to move on. Thank you, Biden, for jumping into that mistake before I even had time to say that Muslims will say this. Even though it's
Allah descends every night, like the hour hand
Allah.
on our clock descends every night. But you use the word like, you can't say like, because that is a simile. So shame on you.
Khalil's methodology and specific theological positions. He is claiming to defend Islamic philosophy in the debate title and adopts the methodology of the philosophers in several key positions that they hold to. However, he is simultaneously claiming to defend Ismaili Neoplatonism, conceived of by such figures as Abu Yaqub as-Sijistani and Nasr al-Khusraw. The problem is that the methodology and position of the philosophers, such as Ibn Sina, is diametrically opposed to that of classical Ismaili theology. My examples are aimed at demonstrating this fact with the intention of exhorting Khalil to take a stand on these key issues as to absolve himself from these.
That's so funny. I want him to take a stand on these key issues. Why he himself won't take a stand on any issue. Well, I guess he technically takes a stand. It's just self-contradictory.
Contradictions. If he cannot do so, he will fail to defend his position in this debate, as his position currently constructed is contradictory. First example.
Man, is he trying to say the most ironic things possible? Like seriously, I couldn't make a more self-owned statement than what Jake is doing if I tried.
Yeah, well, what's really funny is that he picks on the fact that they will take issue with specific things that certain philosophers say and argue against them, to say that he's saying that all philosophy is illegitimate. But again, they're Neoplatonists. This is a philosophical school. It's a very curious position to take, to assert that they are doing no philosophy.
Well, yeah. So I'm not that familiar with Khalil's position, but if he does assert that he's not doing philosophy, then that's clearly self-contradictory as well. Because I mean, all philosophy means is thinking, basically. So Jake, I can give him that he's not doing any philosophy because he's just making incoherent statements and not thinking about anything. But if Khalil claims he's not doing philosophy because he knows he's not supposed to do philosophy, well, then he's going to fall into the same trap later on of contradicting himself.
Can the existence of God be proven through reason alone? Khalil says yes, and he will probably give some form of the contingency argument in his opening statement to support this. However, his classical Ismaili texts say that God cannot be proven by the intellect alone. For example, Nasruddin at-Tusi states in his text Paradise of Submission, and I quote, "As for proving the existence of God Almighty, human beings cannot establish such a proof, because he, the exalted one, is in reality the founder of all established things. Anyone, including Khalil, who says he can prove his existence, therefore claims to have comprehended the reality of the identity of the transcendent being. But such comprehension..."
Wouldn't Jake assert that he understands who Allah is? I mean, what a stupid statement. I know
he says that he doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't understand because it's unlike everything, but then he'll make tons of positive statements about it. But here, Jake actually knows what was being said here because he will articulate it later. So what is being said here is that Allah is not existent, but is the origin of existence.
Well, that's not what he presented it as.
But this right here, Nasr al-Din al-Tusi is actually talking about proving the existence of Allah. You can't prove that he has the attribute of existence. Rather, he is above all of these things. So he is arguing that you can logically, I know that this is, but he's taking,
incoherent.
and again, here, you would go with Jake. Oh yeah, that's clearly what he's saying, that you can't say that God is in any sense. But
well, no. He's not. No. That's not fair. Al-Tusi would not be saying God doesn't exist. He's saying you can't prove it. You just have to believe it, basically. Or in Islamic terms, you just have to affirm it, right?
But yeah, so what they actually argue is that to posit the attribute of existence to Allah is to claim to know him in a way that you can't know him. And that is a philosophical argument.
Okay. Yeah. Okay,
that's
so
what
right.
he's doing.
Yeah, right, that's what he's saying, that you have to, he's basically saying to know Allah exists, you would have to fully know him, and you're incapable of fully knowing him, therefore you can't know this fact. I think that doesn't remotely hold, but that does seem to be what he's arguing, right?
Right. But Jake is saying that you can't make any argument that there is Allah, that Allah. You can't say Allah based on rational argument. That's not actually what this guy's saying.
Okay.
And it will go, I know it's really hard to say that Allah without saying exists, because what else is there? It really doesn't hold together. That's fine. But that is what he's saying. He is making, and yes, they are Gnostic. Neoplatonism is, Gnosticism is a branch of Neoplatonism. Ismaili Gnosticism it's Arianism under another brand. It's a form of Arianism. But let's keep going, and you'll see how clearly it's actually Arian, but you swap out Jesus for the light of Muhammad.
And by created beings is a supreme form of absurdity. And since comprehension of him is impossible, the proof which they wish to establish is equally impossible. Close quote. The famous Hujjah, or proof of the Imam, Nasr al-Khusraw, states in his text Between Reason and Revelation, and I quote, the true doctrine of oneness lies in interpretation of the book and the sacred law, not in some dark interior of the community, as this group claims and as we find in their pronouncements. For this reason, the emissary of God called people to God's oneness by God's command, not by the command of the intellect. They accept religion as a matter of individual opinion so that they may practice speculation. Thus God says, say, it is revealed to me that your God is one God. Are you going to surrender? Close quote.
So I think that this quote is a little confusing because he jumps around as near as I can tell. But I think he's saying like the correct interpretation of the text is authoritative, not what people think about it, which is why God says, I declare I exist. Do you believe it or not? Or are you going to submit to me or not? Right?
Yeah, well, that's it, and that there is a mystical knowing kind of thing is like more ultimate than a logical argument. Therefore, our arguments for mysticism are valid because Allah never makes a rational argument for himself in the Quran, which is hilarious to have someone say that Allah does not make rational arguments for himself.
Therefore, right? Therefore, it's improper to make rational arguments.
Yeah, which is hilarious. Like
but
Allah's
that
good thing
requires rational thought to draw that conclusion. So you're like are committing the sin of using reason to draw the conclusion you're not supposed to use reason. Okay, sounds good to me.
Notice that knowledge of God is by his command, not by reason. Well-respected scholar Wilfred Madlong, in his article entitled The Prophetic Chain and the God Beyond Being, states, and I quote, characteristically, Ismaili theology did not attempt to offer a proof of God, that first concern of any rational theology. A rational proof of what is beyond reason and being was evidently futile, nor was there any need for it. For God, Abu Yaqub affirmed, is more certain than everything certain. This was a certainty which becomes evident to the human mind only by revelation, close quote.
So this guy here, Wilfred, is basically saying that it's pointless to try to prove God because you'll just be less certain than you started, since God is the most certain thing possible, basically.
Yeah, and this is a secondary source too, and it's an excerpt of a portion of a secondary source that gives one shade of what they believe, that's selectively chosen, of course. So,
all right. I was just affirming that we understand what the text means.
So, is Khalil an Ismaili that rejects the position of the scholars he is claiming to defend, or has he in fact left his religion to follow Ibn Sina?
So that's a little bit bizarre of Jake there, that he said that if he doesn't agree with every single statement that every single Ismaili scholar has ever made, then he is rejecting Ismaili thought, which seems a little bizarre to me, but I guess that's how you have to argue when you need to prove someone wrong. I don't know.
Is God the necessary being? Classical Ismaili texts say no, but Khalil says yes. Nasr al-Khusraw in Knowledge and Liberation states, and I quote, under it, there are the necessary existent, which is the universal intellect, not God, and the contingent existent, that is the universal soul, which is under the intellect, close quote. So the necessary being is clearly identified as the universal intellect. Commenting on this passage in an Ismaili publication.
Before we get to the comment there, is Jake correct? I mean, because to me, him saying is the intellect could be is Allah, right? So why is Jake asserting that this is something different from Allah?
Yeah, it's again, Jake is picking and choosing and wanting to distort. But notice that this isn't even the topic of the debate. It isn't what does Khalil himself personally affirm as truth, but what does Ismaili doctrine affirm as true? But he keeps going after Khalil and his personal beliefs and how he believes they differ from Ismaili beliefs. He isn't actually going after Ismaili beliefs. Even if all this were true, what does this have to do with anything? Why is this a bad position to say this?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, right? Because instead of attacking Jake's position, Khalil's position, whatever that is, he's asserting that Khalil doesn't believe what some other Ismaili scholars believe. Even if he was correct, that would have no bearing on whether either one of those two individuals was correct, right? He's not arguing against either of them. He's just arguing they say something different, which is totally pointless.
Yeah. And then Well, just so that you guys know what he was quoting before, it was 22:34, and your God is one God. But the funny thing is, here is there's no definite article, so it's not your God is the one God, but your God is a one God. If you choose to be difficult, which you can, you could be difficult. You could say that your God is a one God rather than the one God.
Yeah, I mean, as you kind of affirmed, this statement is probably taken out of context, and I think he's trying to like focus on the word under and say like this means that they're distinct from one another. But then, of course, he couldn't even affirm what under means in his own theology. So I think he's just playing games, as near as I can tell.
Parvez Morwedge says, and I quote, "Nor is he, Khusro, a follower of Ibn Sina, for whom God is the necessary existent, whereas Nasser places God above the necessary existent. Nasr al-Khusro."
What would that even mean, to be above the necessary existent? Like, okay, so I think he's saying like more important or something. I mean, it's incoherent.
That you can't even say, well, that is an actual Ismaili position, that to attribute to Allah.
Well, I believe that it's an actual
necessary,
position. Yeah. I just don't know what it's supposed to mean, because
well, that would be comparing him. Well, remember how we talk about like unto creation, right? That you're not supposed to do. The Neoplatonists take this to the same degree that the Atharis do. And if you say that he has existence, that is like unto creation because creation has existence. Instead, you should say that he is the originator of existence. If you say that he is, all of these, if you say that he's a necessary being, then you are things in existence are necessary for various things in a way. And so then you are attributing to him something that is like existence. So he is the origin of necessity.
I didn't realize how deep this rabbit hole goes, Mary.
So yeah, and the universal intellect, the universal intellect is the first Platonic emanation, even though they use the word eternal creation instead, but it's an eternal emanation of Allah, because their idea of creation is emanatory rather than creative in a very narrow sense. So
saying
the necessary existence,
right?
Yeah, the necessary existence is the creation, or is the eternal creation of Allah, which is the universal intellect, which is the light of Allah, which is the pen, which is a number of other things.
So let me get this straight. So as Jake affirmed earlier, Allah says that he is dependent on nothing, right?
Right.
And nothing, everything's dependent on him.
Mm-hmm.
However, this position, which I guess isn't Jake's position, right?
Correct.
But this position is that Allah, first, this is so ridiculous that saying that Allah exists is akin to comparing him to creation. So we can't say anything about Allah, I guess, because we can't even say he exists.
Well, he is the creator. That is the only thing that he is. He's the originator, in other words. So it would be more proper to say originator.
But Mary, things in creation create.
Well, they don't originate the way Allah does.
Anyway,
so for that one you can use metaphorical, apparently, but for nothing else can you do that.
But then here, right? Because we know what word create means, because it means something in creation, but apparently that one is allowed for whatever reason. But here, Allah doesn't have any needs. There's nothing he has to do, but it is necessary for creation to exist. Doesn't that make creation, Allah, dependent on one another?
Yes, and Jake will actually make this point later, and because Khalil is very good at verbal gymnastics, much better than Jake, and Khalil will be able to wiggle out of it fairly well, but that is in fact required for this point of view. And really what he says is it's fine, because the originator of the necessary is Allah, so it's fine.
But if it's necessary, then he doesn't have any choice.
Correct. The Ismaili do not ascribe to Allah any choice whatsoever. They have a completely mechanistic universe. entirely. So Allah himself is mechanistic.
So Allah is just a force, right?
Oh, Allah has no intellect. The first thing that comes from him is the universal intellect.
Right. He's just a force.
Yeah.
He's just a law of nature, if you like.
Essentially, yes. But even the universal intellect has no will. Like in terms of free will. You have you have a predetermined will. Everything is predetermined, including everything that Allah does.
So I now see what you meant when you said that Jake has some good points here, right? Because he's saying that Khalil's position is incoherent, and I'm agreeing with him. Problem is his own position is incoherent too.
Presents two remarkable ontological doctrines in this work. One is a radical development of the Neoplatonic idea that existence cannot be attributed to God, and that unlike the Avicennan tradition, the necessary existent is the universal intellect, and not the ultimate being analogous to the God of monotheism, close quote. Ash-Shahrastani, in his text dedicated to refuting Ibn Sina, states, and I quote, "The method of demonstration for Ibn Sina and whoever follows him, including Khalil, comes apart because division does not apply to the equivocal. On the other hand, the procedure of the prophets, upon them be peace, is in accordance with what we will report. So we say, the Creator, exalted as he, is too well known for his existence to be pointed to by anything. And the recognition of him, exalted as he, is true innate predisposition, fitra," close.
So I guess this is a third position, right? Which is the one that Jake is trying to attribute to Khalil. But this is incoherent too.
Well, this is actually supposed to be, well, he's attributing Ibn Sina's position to Khalil and then saying that these Ismailis disagree with it. Now, what these Ismailis are doing is that they are disagreeing with a specific point that Ibn Sina is making. And Jake likes to misrepresent this. And by the way, I'm calling Khalil Andani Khalil rather than Andani, because Jake is Jake. This is no disrespect whatsoever, but it's just I'm treating them equally on purpose rather than going Dr. Andani and Jake. But
Jake the goofball, who has since dropped we can't even call him Jake the Muslim Metaphysician, right? Because he's himself has dropped that title. He doesn't call himself that anymore. So what are we supposed to do? But anyway,
he got too much pushback from that. But anyway,
I know why.
He had. So what he's doing here again is taking a particular Ismaili's issue with a particular part of Ibn Sina and saying, "See, Ismailis throw out the whole thing, even though it's Neoplatonism, a school of philosophy." Yes, but he is arguing against any philosophy rather than arguing for the incoherence of the position. He's just saying they don't have reason because they deny philosophy, which is not true, because it's so transparent. Neoplatonism is a school of philosophy. If you say Neoplatonism denies philosophy, that's just insane.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. So this quote actually didn't say anything different. Then I misunderstood that this was another one of the same school here. It's just saying the same thing, that the Creator is too apparent for you to say anything in creation points to him. But that's utterly ridiculous, because the Creator, if there is a Creator, there should be observable effects of his activity in creation, regardless of whether he's anything like that creation. I mean, that's just a stupid position.
Quote, "Once again, is God the necessary being proven by the contingency argument as conceived of by Ibn Sina, or is he beyond the necessary being and only known through the fitra or the imam as the Ismailis claim? Khalil needs to decide whether or not he is an Ismaili in this debate or a follower of the philosophers in order to even have a chance in this debate, because as it stands, his position is contradictory. Is creation a necessary consequence of God's essence, or is it a free act of God? Classical Ismaili texts say that it is a free act of God, and Khalil says that it is necessary."
So I actually already asked this question, and you told me that the classical Islamis do not affirm God having free will, correct?
They don't.
So why is Jake saying they do?
because he's not understanding Sistani. He just
All right,
doesn't.
let's get the quote and then we can analyze.
Passagistani in the 15th Wellspring titled, and I quote, that asking why God created the world is impossible and absurd, states, the rule has been handed down to us that it is impossible and absurd to inquire into the reason of something, the very manner of whose being is incomprehensible. However, it is generally agreed that no one has ever understood the manner by which the Maker brought the universe into being. Although some scholars did insist that how the Maker brought it into being is by command, they did not understand the manner of that command itself. But since their views are in agreement that the comprehension of the manner by which the universe has its being is outside the realm of possibility, inquiring into the reason of its existence is even more absurd and even further beyond inference. Perhaps the reason of it lies within the question of its manner, and thus understanding the reason is difficult because its manner is hidden.
Okay, there is literally nothing about will here, let alone free will. I don't understand how Jake is using this text to defend the idea that classical Ismaili believe in free will. Like, I can't even understand what he's trying to do.
It's not saying that at all. It's saying that
I think he just like reads this and affirms that's what it says, but it agrees with those previous texts we saw in more words, basically, that you can't say exactly what this means. But that has nothing to do with whether it's by free will or not. Like, this is pointless. Why did he put this slide here? Like, I thought at least he would like quote mine something that could sound like free will.
He's just hoping that
nothing.
That by saying, because he's not explicitly affirming here that Allah does not have free will and that there is a manner in which this is done that is this particular way, that it somehow means that there's free will.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Close quote. Madlone confirms this in the same article cited earlier when he states, and I quote, more significantly, however, these changes reflected the volitional nature, the liberty of the act of creation as conceived in the Holy Quran and Islamic tradition, in contrast to the emanational doctrine of the philosophers. With the same motive, Ismaili theology expressly denied, against the philosophic tradition, that God is the first cause. The basic error of Ibn Sina and his followers in this question is that they view the world as an emanation from God, which is necessitated by his essence, or that. Thus, they describe God in relation to the universe primarily as its necessitator. The world then appears as an accidental, unintentional consequence of his essence. God is, however, in relation to the world, primarily its giver of existence, not of necessity, and revealed scripture describes his acting towards it with terms like option, ikhtiyar, will, irada, creation, khalq, command, amr, and reign, mulk.
So I actually see where he's getting the free will thing here, but what he's failing to understand, right, is that while they're denying the emanation, that doesn't mean they're affirming free will. They're just doing
No. It's the necessitated by his self, because that would make him that this is
right. They deny that it's necessary, right?
Not
what the contradiction I pointed out earlier. They deny that, even though it's a contradiction, but that doesn't mean they affirm free will, because they're happy to affirm two contradictory ideas.
Right. So they describe God in relation to the universe as the necessitator, is what they're saying about Ibn Sina, etc. He says, no, he's the giver of existence, and the giver, and in fact, even the giver of the necessary being. They're removing it an extra step.
It's not kind of right, because they denied. Right, they denied that. You could say even that God exists, let alone that he necessarily exists. So they say, right? They say that he's the giver of existence, not out of necessity, but then they don't say what that is, right? Because and that's the key part that Jake's not understanding here. He's saying, well, if they're saying it's not of necessity, then it must be of free will. But that's not what they're saying at all, because they don't care that those are the only two possible options.
Yeah, and this acting towards it in terms like option, will, creation, command, and reign are understood in the Ismaili sense that he is the originator of option, the originator of will, the originator of creation, the originator of command, and the originator of reign. And by will, they don't mean free will, because there is no free will at all in the Ismaili system. Like,
right. Well, a deterministic being could have a
Right.
will.
right, and that's what that is meant is, and again, he's the originator. Originator, not necessitator. He is the originator of necessity, in a sense, would be a more correct Ismaili view. So I'm not entirely sure that Jake understands this, not 100% sure that he's
It's highly possible
trying-
he doesn't.
yeah.
Right? It's highly possible he doesn't actually understand it. We don't need to attribute malice to him of distorting what it means. It's quite possible he read this word salad and came to the wrong conclusion about what it was supposed to mean, because it is self-contradictory. So there's that.
Close quote. So once again, is Khalil following the necessitarianism of Ibn Sina and the philosophers, or the view that creation is a free act of God, as the Ismailis claim? Khalil needs to get himself out of this contradictory position to even have a chance in this debate. Is the God of
The irony here is, of course, he is in a contradictory position, but not the one Jake affirms that he's in, because Jake just says that he calls himself Ismaili and doesn't affirm their beliefs, which isn't really a contradiction. That's just mislabeling yourself. But that's what he means when he says he has a contradictory position, not that his position itself is internally contradictory. He's just saying you're using the wrong label for your term,
and he's not arguing. He never argues against Ismaili positions.
Right. He's not arguing against the positions.
So he's just like trying
he's
to
not arguing
Khalil.
against any position. He's just saying Khalil holds ideas different than what he says he holds.
Yeah, and then haha, I've now won. It's very odd. It's a very odd approach to a debate. Again, like he was so outclassed in this. He makes some good points.
And this is his opening statement, right? To be clear, this is his opening statement. These are his prepared remarks.
Where he is supposed to give evidence for his position and why it is true. And perhaps in contrast to the other position, he has yet to provide a single support for this being the understanding that people would get from the text, which he just stipulated, or that the first three generations had the understanding that he did. But that's what he's supposed to be arguing for. It's just stunning. All right.
This debate is actually really difficult. Speakers haven't made it easy for the audience. Well, that's true, right? Jake is trying to appear to be a metaphysician, whatever that means. He's trying to appear to be intellectual, and of course Khalil actually is intellectual, so they're using a lot of jargon and technical terms and whatnot, but Mary and I are breaking it down, and there's a lot of words there, but there's not really a lot of thoughts behind all those words, as often happens in philosophical or academic texts. You say a lot of words, but it's really a simple idea behind it.
Yeah, you're trying to articulate it as clearly and exhaustively as possible. So it might be easier, if you don't spend the time picking up apart an entire essay, to misconstrue the short words that I'm saying.
Right.
So there's a reason for the longness, but boiling it down into short essentials is very useful too. So.
All right, let's continue on. I'll hold my thoughts on Jake's opening statement until he's complete.
Of the philosophers in Mu'tazila, the same God of Ismaili theology. It is clear that they aren't. But Khalil tries to make it seem like their notion of divine simplicity is the same, even though it clearly isn't. Nasr al-Khusraw states, and I quote, "To posit one essence with 6 different attributes is not true Tawheed. Quite the opposite. It is to posit a multiplicity. Nor can it be true Tawheed to ascribe creaturely qualities to God. On the contrary, that is anthropomorphism. This group never sees anything better than themselves, and indeed fancy themselves to be God. That is extreme error." Close quote.
I mean, that's just someone's opinion. That's not.
Well, this is an Ismaili scholar, but what he's saying.
Yeah, that's fine. But I mean, what does this have anything to do with Khalil's position, right? This is just an Ismaili saying some position is wrong.
Is wrong. But he's saying that, oh, well, Khalil says that they don't draw from the Mutazilites. Well, they actually do, but there's a difference, or else they would be Mutazilites, right? You have similarities. You drink from the same well, but you prepare it differently, right? Nobody, and he's saying that no, because there is this difference, then it doesn't exist. Now, what the Mutazilites did is that they said that all attributes are nominal attributes, but you should still attribute them to Allah in speaking. So you should still say, Allah has hearing, Allah has seeing, Allah is the knower, Allah is the most generous, Allah is the eraser of sins, Allah is the concealer of sins. Like, you should say all of these things, and that these are true attributes that you can say of Allah, but they don't have ontological existence. And he is disagreeing to the point that he says that if you put these things upon Allah and say that he does have these things, saying that it's nominal is not enough. You have to make him free of everything that you associate with him, because now you're associating with him something in creation. You're associating love with him. You can't do that. You're associating mercy with him. You can't do that. You're associating wrath with him. You can't do that. You're creating this. So how could this be the unification of Allah? To say that he has these things that are in creation. That's what his argument against these, and they boil it down to 6 different attributes, but then say, which is the same as the Ash'ari, I believe, or it's close to the Ash'ari. It's not exactly the same. And the Maturidi, I believe, have one more. I think it's 7 and 8, but they are positing a specific list of 6 attributes to Allah, but then saying that they're nominal. And he's having a big problem with this specific list of the 6 attributes, right?
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Nasser's position is that every attribute is exactly identical to every other attribute.
No, that would be close to the Mutazilite position, because they say they're all nominal attributes, even though they want to articulate the 6. But if you want to articulate exactly 6, you have a hard time saying that they're nominal, right?
Right, because there should be, if it's just different terms for the same thing, then you could have infinite number of terms, right?
Right, as long as they're appropriate, as long as they're fitting, right? But since there are 6, he's like, that's anthropomorphism, meaning that it is comparing things to things in creation. You're making Allah like creation. And
well, no. He says it's multiplicity. There's 2 separate things, right? So he says the 6, saying 6 is multiplicity, and saying using words like hands, that is anthropomorphism.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, no, he's saying that the creaturely quality of the Mutazilites, saying that those 6 different attributes. He's not talking about hands. He's talking about the Mutazilite view, which hands is not.
So like just having the number 6 makes it a creaturely quality. Is that?
Yeah, and positing something. I'm sure that one of theirs was knowledge. I haven't checked their list, but let's say knowledge is an attribute of Allah. To say that because we also have knowledge, that itself, so there's the multiplicity that's a problem, and there's also the second thing, which is a creaturely quality to God, and saying knowledge is a creaturely quality, and you can't say that of God.
So God doesn't have knowledge.
No, God doesn't have knowledge. He doesn't have intellect. He doesn't have any of those things. He is the originator of them. When you say that God has intellect or goodness or anything else, you're saying that he's the originator of those things. And this is a collapsed terminology in the Ismaili view.
All right. Glad we clarified that.
Khalil himself, in a published academic article commenting on this passage, states, and I quote, Nasser concludes his critique of the Mu'tazilites by accusing them of the very anthropomorphism that they sought to avoid. Khalil himself admits that Nasr al-Khusraw views the position of those who believe God has multiple attributes identical to his essence as shirk, which includes the Mu'tazila and his so-called philosopher friends.
So,
And by the way,
fact,
you just pause that.
yeah, so I don't get the point.
That is the difference between an Ismaili and the rest of the philosophers. Khalil is not saying that all of philosophy is correct. He's saying that he agrees with the Ismailis that this part of their philosophizing is an error, that they made a mistake there.
Yeah, I don't get the point, right? Because
No,
supposedly Jake is trying to show that he's not really an Ismaili, and then
But he's not supposed to be showing that. He's supposed to be showing.
I know that he's not supposed to be doing that, but that's what he's trying to do. But then he
Yeah.
says he affirms the Ismaili position. So why did he even bring that up?
I don't. Just because he cites Ibn Sina and he'll say that they're all engaged in the same thing and that they're all in the camp of the philosophers and Athari are the outsiders. And what Jake is trying to argue is that no, the Athari are in this camp and it's really the Ismaili who are outsiders. That's kind of the argument that they keep going to. But
I just don't get what his point is. Right? I just don't even get what Jake's trying to show. Is he just like saying words and hoping people will think that he said something intelligent?
Yeah.
Because he literally has no point. Like, he's supposed to be arguing that the position's wrong, but he's not. He's just arguing that he doesn't hold the position. And then while arguing he doesn't hold the position, he says, actually, he does hold this position where he rejects the Mutazilites. So why did he say that?
I think he's just trying to tack fear him in his own camp. So it's just
Nasruddin.
He is so outclassed in this.
Yeah, I mean, this is pathetic.
Tusi says the philosophers are fuel for hell in his work Contemplation in Action. He states, and I quote, "Firstly, as the philosophers have explained, absolute certainty cannot be achieved by reasoning from effect to cause. But since the highest state of knowledge for the speculative rationalists is to know cause from effect, no rationalist can come to know God. Surely you and that which you worship apart from God are fuel for hell. You shall go down to it. Such is the ultimate stage the rationalist reaches in his quest for perfection." Close quote. So, has Khalil left the Ismaili faith and is now following the methodology and theology of the philosophers? Or is he going to condemn the philosophers and say that they are anthropomorphists that cannot know God and are fuel for hell?
So again, it's the specific thing of attributing attributes that are like unto creation to Allah, that he's saying that you're worshiping. If you worship the eraser of sins, then you're worshiping, or the eraser, it doesn't even say sins in that. So if you worship the eraser, then you're really worshiping something in creation, and you should be careful because that's idolatry. But he's not saying that a philosophical enterprise is completely outside of the correct endeavor. It's just that the rationalists are self-defeating. They're defeating themselves because they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and they need to be careful. And instead, they should have my philosophical Neoplatonic view rather than
my rationalist view, right?
Right. Right.
So, I mean, this statement is another self-owned, right? This time by Al-Tusi, but he's saying, he like explains in philosophical terms why the philosophers are wrong, and then he explains through reason why the rationalists are wrong. He's like self-owning, right?
well again, he's talking about, and here his view is to specific philosophers, not all philosophy, because he's actually a number of the Ismailis talk about how philosophy is a legitimate enterprise, but he's talking about these particular philosophers who attribute to Allah these things. And Jake is trying to put words in his mouth to make him say something else that's even less coherent. So it's just odd.
And so side note here, Mike is having a very interesting conversation in the chat, basically asserting that God can't exist because human beings are imperfect, which is a very bizarre argument to make. But I do hand it to him. He's at least trying to make a coherent argument, unlike Jake here.
Oh, well, I mean, okay, so let me take this argument from the Islamic point of view. It is an important argument, right? To say,
well,
that
to be clear, he's not a Muslim, so
yeah,
it doesn't really matter if it's Islamic.
Well, I think he might be from a Muslim background, and so he'd have a Muslim view of God. So in Islam, Allah is the originator of sin, which has an ontological property, right? So sin is ontologically real, evil is ontologically real. By the standards of great making, a lot of Allah's properties are many things, or he is originator of the real ontological existence of many things that are improper to great making things. So how is he the originator of things that are impossible if Allah is God? So he is actually making an argument against the God of Allah. But you go back all the way to Athanasius, Christians who are educated have never posited ontological reality to evil. Evil is a deprivation of the good. Evil is darkness, and you are knowledgeable of the darkness because you have the light. So it is a name for something that becomes nameable because of the light. So whenever God says that I create darkness and light, good and evil, he's meaning it in those senses, if you even ascribe to that our idea of evil at all. But in context, he actually means punishment, because that is like, oh, evil day that I was born. You don't mean that it's morally evil. You mean that it's baneful to your existence. Mm-hmm. But if you want to force it into a moral view, what that means is that the deprivation of the light that God does and can do in punishment is evil, even though the normative status or the normative actions of humanity is that they choose to love the darkness and to refuse to seize the light.
Mm-hmm. In any case, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's not the subject, but Mike did earlier say that he would take me up on the offer to email me. And I think that would be a very interesting discussion to have, because he needs to justify his claim, right? He's claiming that, for example, human beings could be better designed if they're made of carbon fiber instead of, cells, because then they'd be more indestructible. But how is that better, right? And how is that better in an absolute term?
Yeah, and he also said, by the way, he said that I'm German, so either he has extremely unclear thinking or he is strongly influenced by Muslim thought, because he is attributing to God
there's Muslims in Germany, and the name could have been fake, right? Yep. Most people don't use their real name, and the mere fact that you're watching a stream about Islam, the mere fact you're watching a stream about Islam usually implies that you either are a Muslim or came from a Muslim background or are interested in doing evangelism to Muslims. Since you're obviously not interested in doing evangelism to Muslims, since you're an atheist, and you're not a Muslim, since you're an atheist, a reasonable conclusion was that you're from an Islamic background, and that's why you're interested in this particular kind of content. Just a probability, right? Not a certainty, but it was a reasonable guess as a possibility. That's all, right? Anyway, I will check to see if I got that email here in a second, but let's continue with the video first.
These are questions that need answers to. Khalil's view, and my second argument, is that Khalil's God is not the God of the Quran. Khalil does not believe that Allah is the direct creator.
Hey, 20, well, okay, sorry. There was about 7-8 minutes of introduction. So 12 minutes into his 20-minute opening statement, he finally gets to Khalil's actual position.
of the heavens and the earth. He does not believe that Allah is all-knowing, all-powerful, and perfect. In fact, his books state that to ascribe such names and attributes to God is shirk and anthropomorphism. Nasruddin Tusi describes the Ismaili God as, and I quote, "He cannot be attributed with cause or effect, existence or non-existence, temporality or eternity, necessity or contingency, nor any of the other kinds of opposition. He is beyond any attribute by which something could be qualified, whether it be non-existent or existent, negative or positive, relative or absolute, verbal or in meaning. He is beyond all this and also beyond the beyond and so forth," close quote. Nasr al-Khusraw claims it is possible.
Sorry, I meant to pause there. So let me just back up a second so we can get this on the screen. So once again, another statement that basically says the same thing that we've seen several times. We can't say anything about Allah because he's beyond everything.
So what Khalil should have done is saying that they refuse to posit the attributes of Allah that are clearly in the text, saying that they're of Allah to Allah, by this wordsmithing, which just says, oh, that means that he's the originator of that. Where does it give this meaning? Why would any normal human being believe that Allah being above or beyond that of what they associate with him, or free from that, as meaning that there is no metaphorical or derivative or inferior or not equal, because the likeness here that he's denying in the plain meaning of the text is equality, that he doesn't have the same equal, like no educated Christian would say that the love of God is identical with the love that humans can have for one another and God. What we would say is that God's love is the original and we are the analogical. So it's false to say that God's love is analogical to ours, and that God is the standard. He is the foundation. He is the basis. And so you should properly say it the other way around. But he's saying that God has love and we have love, and attributing, but the thing is, the issue that the Athari have is that both the Athari and the Ismaili refuse to understand the text as it clearly means, that what it means is identical with. And the Athari use it to reject any coherent semantic import to any of the words that they use. And the Ismaili affirm the semantic import, but then say that it's attributed to Allah as the originator, not properly. Not even nominally properly. And because they both have this absolutely ridiculous position that they hold in common, which is funny because an Ash'ari or a Maturidi could actually score way more points against an Ismaili, because they absolutely deny this, if you say love and attribute it to Allah, then you mean by that something in creation, then that's wrong. Then it's like, they don't have that, so they could score points. So the fact that an Athari is going after an Ismaili, he can't argue on the thing that makes the Ismailis ridiculous, because he has the same thing that makes them ridiculous. And they're both arguing, our ridiculous interpretation isn't ridiculous, but everybody else's ridiculous interpretation is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, isn't this statement like, ignoring the exact words, right? Since they might affirm different words, but isn't this the idea of the statement exactly what Jake would affirm, that we use these terms, but we can't say that they mean what we think they mean because the law is beyond them? So isn't this like exactly the same position that Jake has, really?
It's very close, because one says it really means he's the originator of these things which do have the absolute common in creation meaning. And the other one says he really is these things, but it does not have the meaning in creation.
Gotcha. Slight difference, equally incoherent.
Exactly.
Beyond the beyond and so forth, close quote. Nasr al-Khusraw claims it is polytheism to ascribe knowledge and power to Allah when he states, and I quote, "It is wrong to ascribe the opposites of such attributes, such as knowledge and power, to him. Glory be to him. He is exalted on the grounds that these two are creaturely qualities. The so-called theologians of this community have plunged into grievous error in their inquiry, in ascribing their own fine qualities to God and in declaring him devoid of their bad qualities. And for this very reason, they have fallen into polytheism, close quote. So anyone in the audience, if you're listening, who thinks that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, is all-knowing and all-powerful is a polytheist, according to Khalil and Ismaili theology.
I do have to agree with Jake here that this is utterly ridiculous on the surface. To say that God is all-knowing is equivalent to polytheism.
Because again, it's likening to knowledge which is in creation. And so he has to be the originator of it. So, and yes, it is the belief that that thing is polytheism. So really and truly, they do believe that almost all Muslims are polytheists. The Ismailis absolutely hold this position. That is true. But Andani's like, oh, but we don't takfir anyone.
Well,
because you don't say the words. But on the other hand, if you deny those 5 things that you're supposed to assert of Allah's attributes, then you are also worthy of takfiring, essentially. They deny that you are attributing the correct things to Allah as well. The Athari do. And that's why, Athari get very uppity. And yes, Houston, that's exactly right. Allah is, you affirm the word, it has a plain meaning, but it doesn't actually have any meaning. So the plain meaning with no meaning.
Mm-hmm. Because it has a meaning, right? Which is the plain meaning.
Yes.
But we cannot describe that meaning in any terms because its meaning is beyond anything in creation.
Because the meaning is not, well, not even beyond that. It's not, because beyond is a qualitative thing. It has no relationship to anything in creation.
Okay, fine. Because, the one guy did say
we would say that God's love is beyond our love because our love is the analog of God's love. That would be something totally legitimate for any Christian to say. But they can't say that because it's not beyond in the sense of magnitude, it's otherness.
Fair enough. But it's not undefined, right? It has a meaning. We just can't say anything about what that meaning is because we're creatures and any terms we use are creature terms.
Oh, but so it also has a plain meaning. It has a plain meaning.
The plain meaning. It's the plain meaning that everyone knows, except no one knows because we only know creature words.
Exactly. There you go. You got it.
Khalil would like us to believe that when Allah tells us in the Quran that he is all-knowing, all-powerful, and the creator of all things, us Muslims have just simply always misunderstood these verses. My third and final argument is that Khalil's...
Again, irony here, right? Because when Allah says he has hands, that doesn't mean he has hands. But when he says he's all-knowing, that does mean he's all-knowing. You just pick and choose which ones you want.
No. He says that he does have hands. He does.
Well, yeah. Sorry.
And knowing in the same way.
But Jake's implying that all-knowing means exactly what you think it means, whereas hands doesn't mean what you think it means. Right?
Yeah, that's the funny thing is that they never push back on attributes like knowing and denying to Allah knowing in terms that we would use it. They only deny the body parts in terms that we would use it. When you actually listen to the people who label themselves as Salafi, they're Athari, they will talk about Allah's mercy and they will in fact describe Allah's mercy. Now again,
it's a real attribute, right?
Yeah,
it's a real attribute that's distinct from his other real attributes.
Yep. It's the name flavor of attribute, but it is his real attributes distinct from the other attributes. It is unlike anything into creation, and yet you will have someone give a khutbah about Allah's mercy, about his wrath, right, about his eraserness,
and expect you to know what they mean, right?
Being the forgiver, about his repentance, although they interpret it to mean acceptor of repentance, about all of these things, about his believer, being of the believer. But then they turn that, here's the interesting thing, the originator of belief. So they take an Ismaili little wiggle out of that for that one by their interpretation. So they will give, because otherwise you cannot say anything coherent about Allah himself properly. The Ismailis go, yeah, you can't say anything coherent about Allah himself properly.
So actually their position is more consistent.
Very close.
Right?
It's
Their
so
position is more
close.
consistent because they say none of these terms have any meaning. And Jake or Asheri says some of these terms have meaning, but others don't.
Well, no, here, Jake will say that none of them have meaning, but he won't act like that. They're completely inconsistent.
Well, that's really strange then. So we don't know what it means for Allah to be merciful in any sense of the term.
We should not assert to Allah a description of his mercy. We should not distort his mercy. We should not negate his mercy. We should also not compare his mercy to anything. We should not view mercy as metaphorical, but we should not assign resemblance to it to anything in creation. So when you talk about his mercy, that's description right there. And it usually involves the other things too, which is explicitly forbidden by Athari's ideas of what attributes really are. If you claim that this is true only of the physical attributes and not of the names, how dare you say that mercy is not a creaturely property at all in any sense? Because a hand is a creaturely property in a creaturely sense. Therefore, you can't use it. Descending,
right, but, I mean,
you can't describe it. Descending is a creaturely property, so you can't describe it. Well, mercy is too. Wrath is too. Knowing is too. Seeing is too.
Right.
Hearing is too.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like you're saying that Jake technically claims that he doesn't know what Allah's mercy is, but no Muslim acts that way, or at least no Muslim I've ever seen acts that way. They act like they know exactly what that means. And hey, it's just like a human being have mercy, only in greater quantity, or in more perfect way.
So they're not supposed to affirm this, but in all practical senses, they absolutely do. Now, when Ismaili talk about it, it's like behind this veil. So there's this additional abstruseness and abstraction. And really what you're attributing to Allah is attributing to his origination. But that also gets you into trouble because Allah is also the originator of astrayedness. All who are astray are led astray by Allah. So Allah is equally the
astray, right?
Yeah, the originator of astrayedness and misledness and kufr then and
well, I mean, he's the originator of all things, right?
Yes.
Including
so why
sin.
is it that you speak of Allah is the originator of zina? Why is it that you speak of Allah's mercy and not Allah's zina? Why not his fornication?
Yeah,
Why not?
I mean, if all that means is he's the originator of it, then you should say Allah, the zina committer.
Yes.
Or at Allah, the shirker. I mean.
So if shirk is something in creation, Allah is the originator of something in creation, because he is the originator of leading people astray. That means that he is the originator of shirk, right? So the fact that the Ismaili only want the beautiful bits to him and want to distance him from the other bits does not actually work in their system.
I agree. It's very strange, right? Like, I think they're both ultimately incoherent, but at least Khalil's position is consistent that he says you can't say anything about any of these.
Well, no, but the thing is, again, they're the ones who give all the speeches on Allah's mercy and everything else. So
they don't act that way, but they at least have. All right, anyway, let's get through the end of Jake's opening statement.
This concept of God contradicts reason. His God cannot be known and therefore cannot be worshipped. Remember that the Ismailis cannot prove their God exists. This is because they believe God does not exist and is beyond reason. Paul Walker, in his book on the Ismaili Hujjah al-Kermani, describes the problem as such, and I quote, "Languages cannot signify God as he really is, since the signifier must have a referent that exists and can be known. God, however, is unknown. One cannot signify with language or with abstractions in the mind something that is unknown. Therefore, one simply cannot speak about God. Close quote. So
isn't that exactly what Jake's position is supposed to be too, though?
Yes, with the hand. So my question is the referent to Allah's hand known to the mind of Atharis?
Apparently not.
Well, he says that it is, because otherwise he cannot open his mouth to speak about God. So Jake's position here is that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Apparently it is, even though he can't describe it in any terms, right?
But, and again, he has to say that he has this knowledge of Allah. Is the referent to Allah's hand known, according to Jake and Athari Creed? The answer is no. It is not known to mankind. And in fact, there is an explicit doctrine of the Athari that Khalil is going to reference about that. And here he is saying that you cannot open your mouth to speak about God unless you have a known referent. Right. Whenever his position is exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, he's correct, right? He's correct about what Khalil's position would ultimately boil down to. The problem is that he's supposed to have the same position.
Yep.
Old Catholic says, I bet that 80 to 90% of ordinary Muslims never think about this. I think you're way under. I think it's probably like 98%, actually. I would guess.
Minimum.
Listen closely. Every single time that Khalil opens his mouth to speak about God in this debate, I will remind him of the fact that nothing he says actually refers to God at all. This debate is already over, folks. Khalil should simply leave his mic on mute, as he cannot even speak about God whatsoever. Paul Walker again states, and I quote, "Those who have proposed such an absolute view of God, as for example to say with the Neoplatonists that he is beyond both knowledge and being, have been regarded almost necessarily as mystics, at least in theology. Indeed, it has been hard to discover a rational and non-mystical yet religiously satisfying explanation for such a paradox as human worship of an unknown God. It should be clear that As-Sijistani offers no new method for knowing the unknowable God. He never really concerned himself with a demonstration of how he knows the unknown God to exist. This problem, which really has no logical solution, of course, was for him secondary." Close.
You mean just like your position, Jake, that has no logical?
And my question for him is, if you say Allah is the creator, what does that mean in Athari theology? You may not describe it, and you may not like it to anything in creation.
Yeah, he's the creator, but you can't refer to creation to describe
what does it
that
mean
means.
When you say that he is the knower? What do you mean when you say he has power over everything? What does that mean? Do not describe it. If you describe it, you are out of bounds.
Yep.
Close quote. So, Khalil's God does not exist, cannot be known, and cannot be worshipped. On this basis alone, his position doesn't even get off the ground and really shouldn't even be considered. So, Khalil needs to explain to us whether or not he is still an Ismaili, or has he apostatized in favor of the creed of the philosophers. Secondly, he needs to explain to us why we should reject the plain reading of the Quran and the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, all-knowing and all-powerful. Lastly, Khalil must explain to us how we can know and worship an unintelligible God beyond existence and intellect. Khalil believes that Allah is not the creator of the world. He is not all-powerful. He is not all-knowing. He is not perfect. He is not all-wise, and that he only has the ability to perform one action. Imagine that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only has the ability to perform one action. He couldn't do anything else, even if he wanted to. Instead, he attributes all of the beautiful names and attributes to two other eternal beings, known as the universal intellect and the universal soul. And get this, they aren't even mentioned in the Quran. Simply and straightforwardly, this is not Islam. بل نقذف بالحق على الباطل فيدمغه فإذا هو زاهق.
Oh yeah, so you want me to stop there? I didn't know. I thought maybe do the Arabic and then he'd say English, but whatever. So Jake is done. That was the end of his opening statement, other than him proving that he knows how to recite Arabic.
Yeah, but here he just finally made a real argument.
Right. Well, so this is his summary, but you notice
it's actually the first time that he makes an argument.
Well, Okay, so he says Khalil's contradictory theology. He didn't show that anywhere. Notice that his summary doesn't include anything about his own position. Then is Khalil still an Ismaili, or is he apostatized from his faith?
What's that the other thing?
First of all, even if he did switch creeds, that wouldn't mean apostatizing. But second, that one statement is about 2/3 of his opening statement. So on his summary, he makes it a single statement, but that's most of what he spent his time on. Then he says, is Allah really the creator, all-knowing, all-powerful, like the Quran says? I mean, he kind of vaguely alluded to that question
but
before.
not well. Yeah.
Can Khalil prove his God exists? He did. I don't think he ever asked that before. Right? This is a summary, but that's the first time he's asked that. And then finally, as Mary said, he finally argues that Khalil's position is not Islam because it lacks some of the necessary elements of Islam. He put this here, but he didn't actually mention it. All Muslims beside the Ismailis are guilty of kufr and shirk. He didn't actually mention that in his verb, even though he said it in his slide. Hey, we'll forgive that. No big deal there. But that's the first time that he asserted that his position is not proper Islam in the whole thing, right? As near as I can tell, that's the first time he asserted it. So my summary of Jake, he spent, 10% of his presentation stating what his position was, didn't make any attempt to argue for any of it, then spent the majority of his time saying that Khalil has mislabeled his own position. He actually believes a different position. Then spent the last little bit saying that Khalil's position can't tell you anything about God. And then in his closing summary of his own statement, finally makes an argument that this is not Islam.
Now notice that a lot of times the Athari uniquely talk about the names of Allah as distinct from the attributes of Allah in their conversation. So the attributes are stuff like hands, descending, face, the anthropomorphic words, and then the names are the things that are, the seer, the hearer, those things. If they argue that you can talk about those things that are names, then the argument for not being able to talk about the others is incoherent, because the reason that you can't talk about his hands is because Allah is not like unto anything in creation. If that applies to hands, that applies to mercy, period. Yep. Otherwise, you are a total fraud and you are being very selective and being stupid on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I know that this is the forbidden philosophical position, blah, 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 but it'd be a lot more coherent just to say that hands are a metaphor. Now, it might not be justified by the text, but it'd be a lot more coherent just to say that it's a metaphor. And that's
which is what the Athari, the Maturidi, and the Mutazilites do, because that's not like hands are further out than their 6 essential qualities or whatever. They all say it's metaphorical. All of these physical attributes are metaphorical. But then again, you have issues where you run into things about Allah having made Adam with his own hands as being a reason to bow to him.
Are you sure that he would say it's a metaphor? I think he would say it's not a metaphor. But
no, I'm saying that the Ashari, Maturidi, and Mutazilites all say that it is a metaphor.
Jake is Ashari, right?
No, he's Athari.
Oh, okay, gotcha. S sound, it gets added in there.
Yeah, Ashari, Athari. Sorry, I wasn't very, very clear.
Now, you were clear enough. I just was not smart enough.
A moment where your wires cross. That's why I very often call them Salafi, even though that's not a proper name of their creed. That's what they call themselves. The creed of, they'll say oh goodness, they have several other terms. I'm going blank on it now, but like the people of the Sunnah and things like that. So they'll use other words too. But other people don't like calling them Salafi because that attributes to them as if their creed were true, but it doesn't sound like Ashari. So it's
gotcha. Okay, that's why people don't want to call them Salafi, because they've taken that term to basically say this is what the earliest Muslims believed. And other people would disagree with that and say that's not at all what the earliest Muslims believed. Gotcha. So Old Catholic says Jake tried to do a lot in his opening. He could have just argued for his position alone. Well, the problem is he can't argue for his position because he's not allowed to say anything about his position. He just affirms words, but he can't say what any of them mean.
But he should at least have made some arguments to affirm that this is the belief of.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Salafi.
Even if he couldn't tell us what his position means, he could give arguments for
and why
what the earliest Muslims believe,
and why you should interpret these verses in the Quran that way and what that entails. Like he should make those arguments.
Yep. All right, so that we came to the end of Jake's statement. It is after 11 o'clock. Do you want to leave Khalil's opening statement for next time?
Whoops, we can do that, or we can just do his opening statement.
Well, I know, but I mean, it'll
to
take
you.
20 minutes just to play it, and then we'll comment. So it will take, an hour.
All
and a
right,
half probably.
yeah, we can do that. And we also have a lighter crowd because, of course, he actually streamed, or he had another debate today, and they're doing debate review over on David's channel, which means a lighter crowd. So
yep. So we'll just pick it up next time then. So before we go, Jack Ray gifted One Reason Answers membership.
Early, and this is indeed a sign, yet most of them are not believers. Give alone to Allah, give alone to Allah. Ride the wings of Gabriel, give alone to Allah.
As always, thanks for that. He gifted a second one.
Wasting your time on social media is one of the best deeds a Muslim can do. There's a huge need for it. You know this and I know this. So that makes the reward even greater. So give generously and Allah Azza wa Jal will give you even more.
And a third one, but say not three.
We're asking you to give a loan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and believe me, that will be paid back in ways you can never imagine.
Who is it that would loan Allah a goodly loan so he may multiply it for him many times over?
Allahu Akbar, I love that verse. Every time we donate to projects, we're giving a loan to our Creator, the most generous, who will return it to us in this life.
Brothers and sisters, can you afford to miss out on this opportunity?
Yeah, can you afford to miss out on this amazing opportunity? So that's one of the new ones. I promised there was new ones, and we got one of the new ones. That scream is genuine. That's part of their video. I did not add hilarious. That. Like some little kid in the background screams for unrelated reasons, but they just left it.
And yeah, so I am planning on streaming next Tuesday. What I have in the I now once again have a store of streams to do. Will not be streaming the week of Thanksgiving because I'm going to a wedding, but I should be back the week after that. And so I want to kind of dissect this more because it is really interesting from an outsider perspective to see how they're arguing and whether or not they'd apply the same standards to themselves. And the answer is no. It's really funny because, again, an Ash'ari or Maturidi could really score some points to get an Ismaili. So why is this Athari trying to do this? I have no idea. I know why he's Athari. He's Athari only because it's really popular and he'll get more money in the West, even though it's a very minority view in Eastern areas. Because when they come to the West, Muslims encounter Christians who actually read their sacred scripture, and they read the Quran, they read the Hadith, and they go, wow, Allah seems like a big man up in the sky. And the Athari go, we don't deny this, but we reinterpret it, so it's okay, and now you'll feel safe. They go, that must be true. So that's what's going on there, is that they're grasping for something that kind of sounds like it's like attributing to Allah the things that Allah describes himself as having, but then without actually doing that, even though in reality, Allah is a big man in the sky who looks different from creation, only in that the pre-fall, prelapsarian Adam had a butthole, and Allah was solid with no butthole. He only had lungs, but not a three away all the way through. So he did not have complete hollowness. Mm-hmm. So again, this is being able to criticize this and view it and pick apart their arguments from the outside is very instructive.
After that, I have a stream on how the Quran uses the language of liars and has all the tells that you would get from someone who is giving false testimony within it, the things that interviewers look for and interrogators look for. It has all of those attributes. And we'll be doing that by going through a couple of the actual surahs that don't have tons of hidden stuff and really interesting stuff other than that in them. And then I have never actually given my Trinity presentation that I had before, and I figure we could break that into parts and dribble that out as well. So
awesome. So we got lots of stuff coming up from Mary. And to answer the original question in a more succinct way, yes, we will be back on Tuesday to continue this debate review. I did see from Mike that I got an email the second time. I don't know why it didn't come through the first, but whatever, came through the second. I'll be replying back to you probably tomorrow. Because I think it would be a very interesting conversation to have between you and I.
Yeah. And Mike, check out the stream that we started before this that went into this stream. That was where an atheist came on and made arguments about like the laws of physics and things like that.
I think that I did calling them arguments is a little generous, but
yeah. But I did give a coherent answer to those challenges, even though you might not articulate them quite in the same way. So.
Yeah, so I mean, he denied that it was an argument against. Well, he said it wasn't proof against God, or that he never claimed it was. But he has primarily been focusing on how human beings' design is imperfect. This comment is pretty representative of what he's been saying throughout the chat. If you were God, would you design humans in the exact same way? No improvements, implying that something better could be done, implying that our belief in God is at least questionable, because he denied that this was intended to be proof against. So I'm trying to be as fair as possible, right? I'm trying to not misrepresent his position.
Yeah. But again, my position that I expressed whenever, why do babies get cancer, essentially, was that the laws of physics as we have them now and all the laws of nature are post-lapsarian. They are corrupted. They are not the same as what there was in the garden. Now, I do affirm the reality of a real, tangible, material place that was a garden, but I deny that the garden could possibly have our laws of physics, and thus could not have our chemistry and our biology in that sense. So in the same sense that we will have real material bodies whenever we are in the resurrection, so I also assert that though they were not glorified, because they were not in perfect communion with God in the same sense that we will be in the resurrection, but that they had bodies that are of a different kind and a differentness to our bodies. And that is, I believe, clearly what Scripture teaches. So,
hey, no worries, Mike. You were perfectly fine here. You'll notice I didn't give you any trouble throughout, although you weren't on topic. It was fine. You were being respectful and reasonable, and I don't have a problem with you being here and asking those questions. I'd love to have the discussion. Mary gave a reasonable answer. It would not actually be the same as my answer. I would be pressing you on what I was pressing you in the chat, is what makes you think that X is actually better. That's fine, right? And I'm not saying I disagree with Mary's position. It's just not the way I would argue on this particular topic. Anyway, point being, I will email you, and hopefully we can set up a time for a nice chat, because I think it would actually be pretty interesting for people. Thank you all for watching today. As Mary already alluded to, she'll be back on Tuesday. We'll continue our look at this debate. Tomorrow I will have a Bible study on my other channel, and Sunday I will be streaming in some fashion, whether with my wife or as a solo stream. So be on the lookout for those things. Until we meet again, everyone, have an amazing rest of your day. Or, if you're about to go to sleep, have an amazing sleep, whatever the case may be. Until we meet again, let's close out with, well, Jake.
Pray this ceaselessly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me.